Well, welcome, Matthew. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me, Maggie.
It's really good to have you on our show. I'd love to hear a little bit about what put you on the journey and led you to the work you're doing today.
Sure, that's a great question. For me, it started when I was 9 years old. I was having these crazy experiences. My mom, I had asthma when I was a kid, and my mom would make these like makeshift asthma tents with a humidifier and blankets over the table and a little bed underneath, and like the hum of the humidifier. And I'd be reading, and all of a sudden, boom! It felt like I would be uh, hundreds of feet above my body. I didn't know what it was. But the experience was so blissful, so joyous, so exciting that it literally shaped my journey. From that point on, I was looking for that feeling in any way that I possibly could. And, I didn't know at the time because I was young, right? I mean, what are you going to do about it when you're nine? It's like, hey, I'm leaving my body. People aren't, it's not a normal conversation. But my father is a personal development leader himself in the real estate sales training industry. And, my good fortune was when I started working for him at 21 years old, he began to expose me to just all these different mentors. And slowly but surely, I started to piece together and make sense of what that experience was. And it's really guided me to figure out what's the predictable way back to that incredible joy, that bliss, that oneness? And then how do you use that in your normal life? Because I was also a real estate sales trainer, right? So I was like a functionality guy. How do you combine those two things together so you're functioning and you are feeling peace and joy and bliss? It's kind of a cool combo.
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I think that's where a lot of people struggle. I mean, even with my students, highly successful people looking for that thing, that whatever that thing is, looking for bliss, grasping, craving, all of it. And thinking, and I think this is true of most of us, we're thinking that it's out there somewhere. That if we just work harder, we get another degree or a couple of letters behind our name, or we marry that beautiful woman, or we have a bigger house, it's all going to be good. And it's just not so. And I think that's one of the first struggles that students, at least students of mine, come up against, is that how do I have it all? How can I have this enlightened life as well as a successful life? And I think that's what you talk about, right? Enlightened prosperity.
I don't know why the configuration of this body and this existence came out this way, but I don't gravitate towards just being in bliss and peace and harmony and oneness. I gravitate towards applying that to functioning well. And for some reason, this whatever's coming through me, it basically is saying, "This is it. We have made it as a species." And the promise of more stuff and more safety and more congruency in our environment, and the ability to have food and water and marriage and friends and all of that stuff, all of those promises to deliver on the happiness and peace that we seek have been broken. And people are achieving all of that stuff now all the time. It's so much more common to have an organized, effective life than ever before in humanity. And yet we all concede now that the accumulation of stuff and the configuration of your life actually is a bankrupt idea when it comes to inner peace.
Exactly. So when you talk about enlightened prosperity, what exactly are you talking about?
That's a good question. Enlightenment and prosperity typically don't go together. Most of my teachers were either about enlightenment or they were about prosperity. Every once in a while, I found a teacher that was about both. But what I found was they leaned in a particular direction either way. And I find myself sort of equally in both camps, at least at this point in my life, and probably maybe the last 20 years. I've been in this desire for enlightenment. I'm gonna say enlightenment at its most basic state is the recognition that the source of life for you is the source of life for everyone and everything, that we are all one thing expressing itself with infinite variety. And when you have that experience, your mind goes completely quiet because you know with certainty that all is well. Now, in that state of enlightenment, you don't need anything, you don't want anything, you don't have to have anything, all is well. And in that place, you can now express, well, what do I actually, what preferences are coming through me? Because we all have preferences. We all are the creative force, right? There's a background field of energy and information. There are these subatomic particles that are appearing in form. They are then creating all the structures of life and existence. That creative force is occurring. So when you admit, I am creation creating, I am the universe expressing itself, then it's so easy to be in your quiet mind state and then say, what do I want? How do I want to create this life? Not from a place of attachment, but from a place of recognition that you are desire, you are creation. Things are coming through you. So enlightened prosperity, it's knowing that all is well, and it's doing well.
Well, and I think also not just knowing it, but believing. Having a calm inner peace about knowing that it's all going to turn out. No matter what happens, it's all going to turn out. I could manifest, or I could set intentions to manifest something. And if I'm attached to that intention, it's probably not going to manifest. But if I let go of my attachment, of course, it's more likely to manifest, right? So I think part of it is believing that the universe is going to take care of you, no matter what, for the greater good of everyone concerned. So maybe what it is, your intention, whatever intention you set, is not exactly in the greater good of everyone around you. So it won't manifest. But that's not up to us to decide.
Well, I would actually even add that at the level of consciousness that exists within duality, meaning you experience yourself, here's the being, and then here's the world. That separation is an illusion. And at that level of consciousness, I'm going to surrender to the idea that all is well, and it's kind of like, I hope. The next level, the place that I am so eager to assist people to transcend to, is a place where you don't experience a separation between yourself and the universe, that you are the universe, and that the universe is creating, and you are what is being created. And while that sounds like a crazy, interesting concept, it's one that when you experience that the source of life for you is the source of life for everyone and everything, when you experience that we are all one thing expressing itself with infinite variety, there's nothing to trust. There's nothing to trust. You are completely at peace with who you are, where you are, and all the things that are going on around you. And when that occurs, there is an acceleration to the assembling of your life. I'll call that your epic life. Quiet mind, epic life. You assemble, create, generate, and bring forth what is being created so much faster when you are completely at peace with everything in your life.
Well, that's the case, right? Those of us who are on a path or searching for this so-called enlightenment or awakening might be missing the whole point in the search, because in the searching, in the grasping, and in the clinging is not enlightenment. The enlightenment comes once you've stopped the search and you are exactly what you said, where you're comfortable in your own skin. You realize that you're here and you're part of the whole. There is no separation. You're not going to find it out there, whatever that is. And it's, you can go, I see this a lot with students, and you can tell pretty early on with a student where they are in their journey. Because there's the student who thinks if they read more, they go to more seminars, they go to more spiritual retreats, they, do all that they're going to get enlightened. And then there's the student who understands that it's not a linear process, that it's a continual process of uncovering and discovering and discarding. And for many people, in fact, I have one particular friend in mind who's really convinced that if he just keeps going to all these wonderful seminars and retreats, somehow it's going to click. But then on the other side, he's not ready to look at his shadow. He's not ready to look at the pieces and parts of his life that are keeping him from actually letting go and evolving into the spiritual self that he actually is. So that's the piece that I work with people a lot on, is this piece of, letting go, the surrender that you talked about, but also the no longer seeking, that part too.
It's a beautiful thing, and I will say from my own experience that the seeking itself is mired down in the conclusion that you're not there yet, and that when you have the recognition that it is an unfolding process, and that where you are now is perfect, and stand by, it's going to change. Stand by, you're going to progress, and oftentimes the progression is through a dip, and that you go into a breakdown, and that breakdown is leading to a breakthrough. Like when you finally surrender to the idea that you are a type of human being that can't help themselves. You want to progress. You want to move forward. You want to have more. You want to dream bigger. You want to experience more peace. You're one of those people. Like when you just admit it, then you can kick back and allow it to happen. And it's such a great place, because when you're in that allowing it to happen space, now your mind goes silent, because you're no longer needing to survive. When you don't need to survive, there's no need for mind chatter. As soon as the mind chatter goes away, then creativity and resourcefulness and ideas and all kinds of amazing things emerge out of that quiet mind state. It is when we are napping or dreaming or meditating or just on a dreamy walk that we get the most amazing inspirational ideas. And those things come out of a quiet mind.
It's true, right? You really, there's so much in the unspoken. And it's the quieter we are, the more we hear. And I love, teaching my students as I teach them, as we go into meditation, we ask some pretty profound questions. Who am I? What do I want? How am I best suited to use my gifts and talents to serve humanity? And what am I grateful for? Most of us never even contemplate those questions, let alone just throw the question out in the universe and let the answer show up. Because we're all trying to think that if I say, who are you? You're going to tell me I work for so-and-so. I do this. I'm a mother. I have 2 kids. I. When that's just a role that you play. That doesn't have anything to do with who you are really down to your core. So I think it's interesting. What did you do, or what tangible ways have you seen your life shift and grow over these years as you journeyed your own journey?
The shifts have been a combination of destruction, which clears the way to make room for construction. And so the shifts have been predominantly in the realm of releasing releasing, like you were talking about, my ideas of who I am and what I'm all about and why I'm here. And ultimately, I discovered that any purpose that you think that you have is likely some programmed predisposition and isn't likely your actual purpose. And it is when you are willing to confront and destroy those purposes that the true expression starts to arise. So for me, many things have occurred. I've been blessed with the systems for prosperity and the willingness to take myself on to be a prosperous person. And so, nice houses and cars and trips and opportunities, all of those things have occurred for me because as my mind went more and more quiet, I then freed up mental capital to think about, well, what do I actually want? What do I want to do? How do I want to make my life epic? How do I want to create this life that I'm living? And so I have, through the process of destroying old systems and processes and ways of operating and beliefs and who I am, that though that was a painful process, the flip side is once the forest burns down, then new life can grow, and that new life gets to be directed by an unattached, no need to have anything happen human being, which is distinct because there's no survival or fear in this new creative process. So, that enables me to create a life that is very contrarian. And I don't follow the rules that most people follow because I find that the rules are mostly designed to keep us alive, keep us safe, have us fit in with the rest of the group, et cetera, et cetera. So, just to make it concrete, I've released albums. I've had songs hit the Billboard charts before. I've had other artists release my songs. That's in the realm of music. I have shaped my body and transformed it into a body that I want, that functions for me. I have created relationships with people in my life that are deep and authentic. And I just think that there's so much magic when you aren't caught up in all of your mind chatter, what if and what, and I don't know, and I don't have time and I need to, and I don't know, what about this thing, and everybody else has it and I don't have it. When you're caught up in all that, you can't actually focus on the things that are really interesting to you. And therefore you don't take action to move the stuff down the court that is important and valuable to you.
Well, and that's one of the things I think in my own process that really came alive. The more I meditated, the more still I got, the more creative I became. So all of a sudden, it's like redesigning the house. I'm not an interior designer, but all of a sudden, it's all of these creative juices flowing, redoing the entire landscaping, designing the guest house on a napkin and handing it to the contractor. Who knew? Right? So I think it really is. It's about getting still and being able to get in touch with that natural creative force that's always and already inside.
Yeah, and let's be honest, getting still is a really important practice, one that I recommend that people take on. And yet, getting still, meditating, the practices that so many teachers have told us about, has only so much return because society itself is a disruptive, fear-based, greed-based, focused on survival system. So when this peaceful person like you or I interacts with the survival-based system of the world, it activates our survival system, which I call the drunk monkey in your head. And suddenly the drunk monkey is going overtime. It's been activated by interacting with the environment. So the question that I had to look at and devote myself to is, how do I operate in a state of profound joy and peace in the middle of the chaos, the insanity, and the nastiness of the world. How do you do that? Because the world doesn't care about the stuff we care about. The rest of the world, they want to look good. They want to gather stuff up. They want power. They want to survive. They want to manipulate. They want to be a victim. These are all wonderful, terrific survival states. And for some reason, you, me, the people who listen to your podcast, we were born a different way. We were this different aspect of humanity that says, wait a second, survival is important, but survival's pretty much handled. How do we now operate in a state of peace and joy in the process? And so my methodology really developed because I was on the hook. I've been coaching people one-on-one since 1993. I've coached thousands and thousands of people to get their mind under control so that they could take massive action and do the things that were important to them, undistracted by the insanity of the world and the disturbances of the world. So meditation, while it's a practice that I use regularly and highly recommend, I don't subscribe to the idea that it is the end-all process. To me, it's one of the systems that you use to keep your mind in a quiet state, a free state. And then when you're out in life, right, you can't meditate when your parents are over for Thanksgiving. You can't meditate when your boss is in your face telling you that he or she needs something that you don't want to provide. You can't meditate in those moments. So what do you do instead?
Well, meditation isn't like a go-to cure for those moments either. The foundation of meditation sets the stage for you to arrive into those situations with a much better mindset and much better ability to handle the chaos that's around you. I mean, I did a lot of work under Deepak Chopra, and he loves to say, oh, you could meditate in the middle of Grand Central Station during rush hour. I'm like, well, maybe you can. But, you know, that's the muscle. That's the muscle. Teaching meditation as a foundation to build the muscle to insert the pause in those moments where the boss is in your face or someone cuts you off or your teenager's being sassy. That's the key. It's not about, at least for me, it's not about using meditation as a place to go to get out of some pickle I'm in.
Agreed. And after 26 years of real dedication and research, what I've found is that for my students, there's a 4-step process that you can use to get your mind to quiet down permanently, as in never talk again if you don't want it to, and to then utilize your mind as a tool rather than having it use you. And so for me, in my book, Quiet Mind, Epic Life, I talk about the process that I've created called the rapid enlightenment process. And that is simply an awareness process. So first you become aware of that your mind is not your friend. That your mind, all that unwanted, uninvited chatter is something that I call the drunk monkey. It seems random and chaotic, but it actually only has about 12 total functions that it does. And that all the thinking that you do fits into 12 essential categories. And when you're able to identify the category, you can see, oh, there it goes again. You can start treating your mind as a pet rather than as you. But that only served me so well. And ultimately, I would still get disrupted a lot just by observing my mind. And I ultimately had to come to understand that my mind was actually being motivated to speak. And it turns out that the mind is driven to talk to you by what I call 10 hidden motives to survive. So this next level is the recognition that there's a motivation, there's a survival motivation that's being activated. And when survival is gone, the mind literally stops talking. Now, once you do that, then the next thing you got to do is you have to connect with enlightened perspectives. And this is the thing that I so appreciate about your work. You keep pushing your listeners and I'm sure your clients as well. You keep pushing them to connect with these enlightened perspectives. And these are perspectives that transcend the illusions of survival consciousness. And you actually practice perspectives that acknowledge that you're infinite and that all is well. And then once you do that, your life no longer makes sense. So when you do those three things, suddenly you're in a place where you're looking around and you say, nothing that I do makes sense. Nothing that all of the things that I'm up to seem ludicrous, irrational. So then you have to do the fourth thing, which is you have to practice something called recontextualization. And that's really the skill of shifting the context of the situation and adjusting the way that you are viewing your situation so that you are able to maintain an acknowledgement that all is well. And in that state, you walk into the meeting, the boss is going to come down on you hard with some new thing or whatever, but you walk into the meeting and the presence that you are is so influential that boss is no longer capable of presenting a negative, agitating, anger-filled, forceful message, that literally your presence alone transforms them in the moment. It's really, really spectacular when it all comes together.
So tell me a little bit about what kind of maybe obstacles or internal fears you might have encountered in your own journey.
Great question, Maggie. Great question. So for me, I'll have to go all the way back to, let's call it 2003, 2004. I'm at this time in which I'm having a realization. And the realization is that the work that I had been doing to observe my mind wasn't producing the result that I thought. I wasn't experiencing the profound states of peace and joy that I was hoping that was going to get me. And I was meditating at that time 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day. And yet the mind would still just ram itself in there. And one of the fears that I had was it's never going to be. I'm not destined. I have this feeling in my heart like, oh, I know that peace is possible. I know that a state of joy and oneness is possible. My teachers are telling me, apparently I'm doing something wrong. That was a fear that I had. And that fear for me disappeared when I was with one of my teachers in Tibet meditating, and all of a sudden, just boom, it disappeared. I went into a different domain, and it was in that domain that I began to distinguish that the mind itself had a motivation. Then there were other fears as I continued on my path. So, I don't know what other people experience, but I can tell you what I've experienced and what many of my students have reported is that when your mind goes completely quiet, you're like a spider in the middle of its web. You can feel all the vibrations all around, and vibrations, I'm literally using that word metaphorically, but you all of a sudden you feel stuff you can't make sense of. You experience things you can't make sense of. In the enlightened state, there is an awareness that human itself is one expression of consciousness amongst a infinite layered expression of consciousness. And so one of the fears that I went through early when my mind went completely quiet was these fears of, will I ever be able to function and operate again? Well, do I have to leave society? Do I have to leave my kids and my family and go, be in silence and renunciate and renounce the world? That was a big fear. And that really did drive me in my methodology. That idea that it's like, no, people renounced society in the past because society was not organized at the level that it is today. And the idea of working to maintain your peace in such extreme negativity and chaos was impossible. But today, we're living better than ever. Every single metric shows that the totality of humanity is having a better, more sustainable experience than ever in human history. And when you step back and look at it, it's our time, Maggie. It's our time to come into these enlightened states and operate in society and be kick-ass and be badass and be in business and be great moms and be amazing parents and do the hobbies we want to do and live the life we want to live and break the rules of you have to find a family and you have to get married and then you're going to do this and then you get money and then you retire, right? But all of that stuff was a survival conversation. And that no longer applies.
Yeah, I love that because you bring up several very great points. And I also think that just this whole idea of it being an obstacle, I remember feeling that same way about, do I have to go live in a cave on the Ganges outside of Rishikesh in order to be okay around? Or can I even leave the house? When you realize that society is not operating on the same level that you are, but the whole crux of it is, and I think this is what gave me juice to do what I do, is no one's gonna awaken if I don't share. And if they don't awaken, I can't awaken, because we're all one, right? So it behooves me to be of service to that person who might be struggling, or to that seeker that might be looking for that peace and joy you talked about, that we all look for. Yeah.
It is an interesting time indeed, and one that we're standing on the shoulders of the human beings that came before us, who were devoted to an inner quality more than an outer quality. And right now, the current status quo in society, rightfully so, is to optimize the outer state of reality, to optimize it so that we are more sustainable. We can live better, live longer, live easier lives. And I personally couldn't be happier with the way in which the world is going. And simultaneously, there's a giant group of human beings that are being born into a natural predisposition to optimizing the inner state. And today, we are ripe for that idea.
For sure. And we can't wait. I mean, I think there's an urgency now, looking around at the world and the state of all of the affairs, not just climate and burning forests, but political disruption and inability to listen to one another and allow people to have their own opinions and be okay. I think it is up to us to make it happen. I mean, we have to. I think our society is at stake.
And I'd like to propose a completely different, less popular point of view. I'd like to propose that from an enlightened perspective, what we're experiencing right now is perfect exactly as it is, and that destruction is the beginning of creation, and that all of the perceived or amplified negativity that we're experiencing is simply an aspect of how conscious we actually are. So much of what we are experiencing is the contrast. It's sort of like we're the princess and the pea. We have 10 mattresses. We're so comfortable, so cushy. And that little pea underneath is just bothering us like crazy. But the amount of conflict in the world is less than it's ever been. The amount of self-expression that people have is literally hundreds of times more than it has ever been. The safety and security that a person experiences is greater than it has ever been. But all of that creates a contrast, because when we do experience things that are destructive and degrading and negative and agitating, when we do experience them, it's very heightened. It's very intensified. But when your mind goes quiet, you see, oh, what a beautiful, perfect evolutionary progression we are all experiencing. And this time of destruction that we're in right now is going to give way, like it always does, to mind-blowing gains in the experience of human beings. I am so delighted and excited by all of the negativity and the angst that is being produced.
It definitely is the catalyst for change, right? As long as we're awake, right?
Not even as long as we're awake. I beg to differ. I think that necessity is the mother of change. And I think that necessity is created by survival states. So I'm happy about that. Where you and I like to play is we like to play up here. So if necessity is the sort of the mother of invention, I guess, then a quiet mind or peace of mind is going to be the father of inspiration. And I think what you and I are hoping for is for more people to have a platform for inspiration. But you know what? Survival is the name of the game at this moment. So allowing people to create new ways to operate out of their fear and anger and angst about what is happening today, great. You and I just don't want to play that way. We want to actually be at peace and be a part of the inspiration for things that are changing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that that's where we are.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, because it would be, I did an interview, I don't know, a couple months ago with somebody, and it was so negative. It was really interesting because everything he was saying was like, it's apocalyptic. We're going to, the world is asleep and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow. It caught me off guard because I don't come from that frame of mind. And so it was really interesting to inspire me to think as he does and from his perspective and sort of see where that perception comes from, because it really is all about perception.
It's a survival. Anything other than all is well is survival. And most of our spiritual teachers, not all, most of our spiritual teachers are still mired down in their survival frameworks, and they're speaking spiritual truths inside of survival context, and it diminishes the power and the effect of that spiritual truth. And one of the things that I've really worked diligently to do is to discern the degree to which a statement or a context strengthens me or weakens me. I'm a student of a man named Dr. David Hawkins, and he wrote a book called Power versus Force. This is a highly recommended book to read. And over a 20-year period, he did a set of studies to utilize muscle testing, how strong or weak your muscle is when it is stimulated by an idea. And he was able to distinguish a scale of consciousness using this framework. And for me, I have since abandoned the scale of consciousness. I still use it. I am still his student. But standing on his shoulders, I've begun to distinguish that there are things that strengthen you, ideas, context, frameworks that strengthen you, and there are ideas that weaken you. And you and I, fundamentally, we know we don't want to be weakened. If we are weakened, it activates the mind. We go into survival. We start problem solving. We start thinking about what am I going to do? All of that stuff happens. But when we're strong, when we're fortified, all of a sudden, there's no need for the mind to be problem solving. All is well. And so in my methodology, the enlightened perspectives are perspectives that are universally strengthening to any human being that thinks them. I'll give you an example. It strengthens every single person that I've ever tested this on, and I have tested untold thousands of people, arms like crazy. It strengthens everyone to think, I am an infinite being. I've lived multiple human lifetimes, and I will continue to incarnate by choice because it's an interesting experience. It strengthens you. Now, I don't know what any of that means. I can't comprehend it in this situation. I don't know if it's true. I was raised a Christian. So to me, it completely fried my circuits when I first started to understand or see this phenomenon occur. But what I have found is when a person chooses to adopt those frameworks, they are strengthened, they are inspired, they're energized, they're more bold, they're more courageous. They'll take on things that they've been putting off. They'll stop doing things that are guilt and obligation. It's miraculous what happens when a person adopts a strengthening, enlightened perspective.
I love that. That's just so beautifully said. Beautifully said. Who do you think has most influenced your life? And I don't mean just your spiritual path and all of that, but your life overall.
I don't think it's a person. I think that the single most influential thing in my life has been silence. And I don't know how to explain what that even means. I think I'm probably young in my path of being a person who can explain the experience of a quiet mind. I think that I have a lot of wisdom in explaining to people exactly what it takes to create a quiet mind, like the systematic procedural process to do that. I would say that I have gained a tremendous state of mastery. But in describing what silence is and how it is experienced, I'm still a young teacher in that way. I don't know what to say about it. But people in society, I have found that over the last 20 years, all of the work that I have been doing has been about transcending or surrendering or releasing any of the influence of cultural indoctrination and human beings. And then that said, like you said, of course, I have people that I choose to follow. Then I follow them. And as I follow them, I find that at a certain point, I experience a limitation in my own ascension. And then I must surrender. I must surrender their teachings. I love Dr. Hawkins, and I have surrendered his ideas. And now I stand on my own 2 feet with my own set of contexts and frameworks about what it means to utilize muscle testing as a way to create rapid enlightenment.
What suggestions do you have for anyone who might be listening to the Life Illuminated podcast that might be feeling stopped living from that life that they envision?
I've got some great stuff. So I think that one thing that they can do immediately is play a game over the next week where you admit that your mind is not your friend. That your mind doesn't actually want to achieve your goals. It doesn't want you to have the life that you want to have. It wants societal, cultural, survival-based things to occur, and that you are, in fact, a creative, a contrarian, a rule breaker. You want to live above social norms. And therefore, listening to your mind in general is absurd, because in the end, you'll find that your mind is concerned with survival needs, not with thriving needs. And you can't thrive if you're stuck in survival. So the first thing that I would recommend is that each of our listeners plays a game with themselves. Admit every single day that your mind is not your friend. I mean, let's be honest. Who else calls you fat or stupid or tells you that's never going to work or premeditates all the reasons why things are going to go wrong? Just your mind. If we had friends like that, we'd be like, get out of here, right? That person would be our friend. They would be like, I don't know, that person's negative. But our mind, it's like, oh, well, that's who I am, and I just accept it, right? No, it's not who you are. It's a mechanism. Then the second thing that I would recommend that people do is practice the fundamental principle of the rapid enlightenment process. And the fundamental principle of the rapid enlightenment process is total and complete acceptance of all people, of all situations, of all circumstances, including yourself. Total and complete acceptance. Admit that you don't know anything. Admit that everything that you know is either something that you have created or learned from someone else, but none of it is actually true. You have a perspective, you have a framework, and in many ways, your perspective and framework are actually screwing you over. Practicing total and complete acceptance of all people, of all situations, of all circumstances, including yourself, absolute game changer.
Nice. I love that. And where can people find you or learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you?
If they go to MatthewFerry.com, that's where they can find my blog, my videos, my podcast. You can get a copy of my new book, Quiet Mind, Epic Life. You can get that on Amazon, or you can find it on my website, MatthewFerry.com, MatthewFerry.
Easy enough. Well, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have a little chat with you today and getting to know you a little bit. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really, really appreciate you bringing to light these ideas for your audience. I'm so grateful.
Likewise. And I hope that we chat again at some point in the future. And until then, I hope that if you're ever in San Diego, you come by and take a little peek at Satsang House and hang out with us.
Rock on. Thank you, Maggie.
All right. Thank you.